When you're all caught up in your story, memento mori. When you're high on your horse in your glory, memento mori. Who knows what time we have left, so raise a cup. Here's to death, it's closer than you might think. Every day you're on the brink. When the sun goes up in the morning, memento mori. When the night crawls out with its warning, memento mori. Who knows what time we have left, so raise a cup. Here's to death, it's closer than you might think. Every day you're on the brink, it's mori. Time we have left, so raise a cup. Here's to death, it's closer than you might think. Every day you're on the brink, it's mori. When the sun goes up in the morning, memento mori.
Death. Just take a look around. It's everywhere. And if it hasn't touched you yet, it will. You never know when it might happen. Could be today, could be tomorrow, but soon. Everything you have, everything you know, everyone you know, and everything you think you are will one day be taken from you by death. Now this may be shocking, this may make you want to look away, and perhaps that's what you've been doing this whole time. Do you know death? Have you looked it square in the face? What does it mean to you? Those questions and more are what we're going to be answering during this workshop. Facing death to come back to life. So stay with us, don't look away, and this may be the most life-changing day you've ever experienced.
This is Garrett with Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and I'm here today to present to you the Death Workshop. This workshop has been a long time in the making, and I've debated for a long time on what exactly needs to be included and also what should be left out. So before we dive into the meat of this workshop, I wanted to mention what we've left out. Now what I've left out is a lot of stuff related to, for example, serial killers. I'm not going to show you any pictures of gore or any kind of car accident deaths, any kind of shocking or absurd or ridiculous ways of looking at death. Now, of course, those are all out there, and it can be beneficial to look at that stuff just to get rid of some of the fear and the shock and some of the resistance that you might have when thinking about or trying to get a clear view on death, what it is, what it means to you, and what it isn't. Okay, so I'll leave that up to you, but there's plenty of that out there on the internet, plenty of that out there to find in the newspapers and in the news every day. So if you want to focus on death in that sort of shocking, gory way, feel free to do that. But today I want to talk about it in a more relaxed and thoughtful way. So in the beginning, I wanted to put together, or I had thought about putting together a series of little snippets about death, and then clips, for example, news clips and video clips of car accidents and different types of sudden unexpected death scenarios, simply to give you a presentation and a real experience of how sudden and how quickly death can enter into your life. Now, it's usually, when I say that, I'm not meaning your life ending, of course, because you're not going to be there to witness that. But usually death comes into our lives in the form of people we know, and then suddenly those people are no longer with us. Okay? So when we're talking about death, most often we're talking about the death of other people. Now, in terms of your own death, there are ways that you can contemplate that. You can get face to face with your ideas about that, and you can demystify that for yourself, remove some of the sting of it, and we will get into some exercises that will help you do that. I also wanted to start with a bit of a discussion I had with a friend, a close friend who I had asked to share with me what her points of view about death are, and what is really the point of this workshop, and what is the point of coming face to face with death. Of course, the name of this workshop is Facing Death in order to come back to life. Okay? Facing death to come back to life. And what she sent me was, whose life is it really? If you can't even contemplate taking your own life, for example, well, then it ain't yours yet. It can give tremendous purpose to your life, seeing how meaningless this all is and really coming to terms with it to stop the hardship, or the so-called hardship, of laboring away for things that you don't give a shit about if you are going to die in the next hour, in the next week, in the next month. Okay? So facing death can really put things into perspective. It puts power back into your hands, basically by helping you realize that it's your life, that it's utterly meaningless. And from that realization, you find and you experience that you are absolutely free to do whatever you want. Now, if you know that your life could end at any moment, then what you do with your life will hopefully be a lot more enjoyable, and it will be a lot more satisfying to you than doing things you really don't want to do and suffering through your life thinking that it's going to go on forever. Okay, so that's part of the point of today's workshop, is facing death in order to come back to life refreshed and to start assessing your life in terms of what you really want to do. What is it that really satisfies you? And if you don't know what really satisfies you, then that's a great point to start with. Start finding out what really satisfies you, and start cutting out of your life all the things that do not bring you deep satisfaction. Okay? Again, you never know when it's going to end. Now, another point to make here is that also by paying attention and coming face to face with death in as many ways and as deeply as you can, you will also stop taking the people in your life and the situations in your life for granted. You will stop falling asleep to the beauty, to the majesty, and to the mystery of perception and the mystery of life. Okay, so most of the Art of Not Giving a Fuck workshops are all about starting from scratch and then looking at what you know for sure and then exploring outward from there. Okay, so relationships. You throw away all the ideas that you have about how relationships are supposed to be. You look at your own experiences. You evaluate them based on what satisfies you or what frustrates you. And then you start to gather your own data and go into more relationships based on what it is you really want, and with a sense of curiosity, with a sense of exploration, and with less rigid ideas, less rigid expectations about what's supposed to happen, and then ultimately less limitations on you while you explore. Okay, now the same thing goes for this Art of Not Giving a Fuck workshop on death. What does it have to do with not giving a fuck? Well, by paying close attention and keeping death in your awareness as much as possible, you will ultimately automatically stop giving a fuck about things that are not important in your life. And then conversely, the things that are important to you will start to become more prevalent in your life. You'll start spending more time on those and less time on things that are not important to you. So again, paying attention to death, keeping it in mind, you'll inevitably spend less time giving a shit about what other people think of you, okay? Less time worrying about your appearance, for example, less time worrying about a bunch of bullshit that just does not matter in your life. And if I can help you have that experience with this workshop, then I'm honored to do so. So let's get into this a little more deeply. Let's take a look at what's going on in our Western society in relation to death. Most of the time, we have a goal of sanitizing, okay? Keeping it all sanitary, keeping it out of our awareness. Now, not so long ago in history, we have, for example, a lot of houses, older houses in Europe were built with a room close to the front door on the main floor that was considered the dying room. So there would be a sick bed placed in that room, and then when a relative was approaching death and it was obvious, then they would be put in that room on what was called the sick bed or the deathbed. Family was able to gather around and spend time with that person, and then after the person died, they were generally left in that room for at least 2 or 3 days while the family gathered in the presence of the dead body of the relative. So whereas now we have the moment of death, the body is removed almost immediately, brought to a morgue. If an autopsy is necessary, that's performed, and then the body is put into the ground or burned as quickly as possible. But basically it's removed from our presence almost immediately, sometimes for sanitary reasons. That just developed as civilization got more and more industrialized. People needed a process to deal with bodies and to make it more sanitary, or at least that's the excuse for that. But also, it was a way of removing death from our lives, okay, by sanitizing our mindset, sanitizing our awareness, and only staying aware of nice, happy, pretty things instead of being aware of the reality of death in every moment. I'll tell you a story that happened that kind of inspired this workshop just over the holidays. I think it was on December 26th. I don't remember the exact date, but I decided to go by myself to the Museum of Death in LA, in Southern California, in Hollywood to be precise. And it's an experience I highly recommend to any of you who are have a strong enough stomach to handle such things. I know for some folks, for some of you watching, it's no big deal. You go through there and have a good time, become more aware of your life, and stop taking things for granted. But for some other of you, it might be a really difficult experience. For me, I thought it would be really easy and rather enjoyable to just refresh my awareness of death and therefore refresh my awareness of life. But I did get caught off guard by that experience. I went in, it must have been about 6 p.m., and I think I stayed for a total of about 2 hours, give or take. And when I first went in, I was all alone in there. The employees were really nice, and they must have just trusted that I'd be okay. Apparently a lot of people pass out in there, and they will often come around to check on you, but for some reason they didn't really come around to check on me. And I walked into the first room, which is the serial killer room, and when you enter, there's paintings done by serial killers. Paintings, drawings, pen drawings, everything from the most crude pen drawing to the most elaborate oil painting done by various murderers. So I took that in for a little while and looked around the room and saw this art that was produced by people who had made it part of their life's work to kill other people. And I started to let that sink in. I started reading the little articles on the wall and became rather fascinated with that. And up in the corner of the room was a television set with DVD on loop of various trials, interviews, and other types of documentaries about these serial killers. Now, I had heard in that space that there was an actual decapitated head of a famous serial killer from France. At this point, I had forgotten that that was supposed to be in there, but I remember now that that was something I thought would be fascinating to see, the mummified, decapitated head. Okay, and so I stood around in this room for a while looking at the various books written about killers, books written by killers, paintings done by them, letters between various fans and then killers. I got a really deep sense of the fascination some people in our culture have with these particular people, and I started to wonder what that was all about. At a certain moment, fear crept over me. It wasn't a fear of being killed. I don't know what it was a fear of, but a deep sense of fear and creepiness started to crawl up my spine. And at that point, I felt like leaving. I thought, $15 is not much to lose. I'll just get out of here and forget about this experience. And then I thought, no, I came here for a reason. I'm not even exactly sure what that reason is, but I want to persist with this experience. So I'm just going to keep going with it. So I decided to keep going, and I just stood in that room and felt in my body what was going on. I made an effort to not judge, to not catalog, to not label the feelings I was having going through my body. Now that's a trick you can use in a lot of different situations in your life. Becoming aware of your internal movements of emotion, but without labeling them, without believing the storyline about them. Okay, so I knew that there was no threat on my life in that moment, as far as I could tell. And so I decided to stick with the experience, even though it was rising in intensity within me. So at that point, I started to look around, and I remembered, oh, there's supposed to be a severed head in here, a decapitated head. And suddenly I noticed it was sitting in a glass case directly in front of me, and it had been there for that entire time. Now, why didn't I see that? Why didn't I see that right away? Now, it didn't horrify me or freak me out to see it. I've seen mummies before at Egyptian museum installations and whatnot, so it wasn't that big of a deal. I've seen my own mother's dead body in a casket. That was rather difficult to look at. It had swollen up quite a bit from the antibiotic usage that happened right before she died. So I had seen that in my life. I also saw quite a few friends who had died, whose bodies were prepared for burial by what I would say embalmers who were not very skilled at their job. So the effect was sort of horrifying. So I'd seen these kinds of things before. But what was interesting was that I saw everything else in the room besides this severed head. So what was it that was keeping that out of my awareness? Now, I tell that story for an important reason, and I'll tell you about the rest of my experience at the Museum of Death as we go on here. But I tell you that story for an interesting reason, because often looking at death in our lives is the same as me looking at that decapitated head and not noticing that it was there. One of the interesting things they mention at the Museum of Death is they have a bunch of shirts or cards or little patches that you can get that say D period I period E period, which they say stands for death is everywhere. And that's the reason they opened that museum, was they said there's just extreme lack of awareness of death in our culture, and so they decided to take that on and put together the museum to offer people who wanted to bring the awareness of death into their lives a place to do that. Okay? So it's one thing just looking around online, watching various YouTube videos, which you can watch a lot of. And in fact, in preparation for this workshop, over the last few weeks, I spent a lot of time looking at various videos about death, suicides that were caught on film, and just got myself deep into the mindset, which I may at some point curate an online experience similar to the Museum of Death. Time will tell, and you guys will be the first to know when that's available. But that being said, you can also do that on your own, but it's an interesting experience. And each time I was preparing to do this workshop, I ended up getting mired in looking at endless amounts of these videos and reading endless amounts of articles and just getting immersed in death awareness. And then I'd find myself becoming more aware of my life, and then I would have spent all the time I had dedicated to filming the workshop by doing all that research and getting lost in it. So there is some kind of fascination with death. Now, what is that? Well, it's a mystery. No one knows what happens when people die. No one knows. However, there are endless amounts of religions dedicated to giving you an explanation of that, so that you can stop paying attention and stop being aware of that mystery in your life. But what I'd like you to do is to become more aware of the mystery of that in your life and keep your focus solid on death for long enough for you to come back to life refreshed, to open up your perspective again, and to start to become aware of what's going on in your life. Okay, if you're ever bored, or if you're ever lost as to what you could be doing, then take a look at death. Remember that it's everywhere. Everywhere. There are more people who have died than there are people who are alive. And by realizing that, you can start to realize that everyone and everything in your life, including your ideas about yourself, will all go away. Just like you saw, I said in the intro to this course, everything that you know, everything that you are or that you think you are, and everyone that you know or have ever known in your life will disappear from your life at some point. But we act as if the opposite is true. Most often we go through our lives getting pissed off by ridiculous things, having ridiculous arguments with people, and I'm no exception to this, simply because we forget about the very short amount of time that these people, these situations, and these things will be in our lives. Okay, I had a whole load of camping and wilderness hiking gear that I had saved up over the last 10 years of my life. And most recently, just this past December, all of those things were stolen, just removed from my life in about a 10-minute period while I was in a store right in the middle of broad daylight in a busy parking lot. I came back out, and all that stuff was just removed from my life, just in an instant, okay? And I had taken most of it for granted. Some of it I hadn't even used for a year, but it just disappeared out of into thin air, so to speak. Of course, the most logical explanation is that someone took it, but it doesn't really matter if someone took it or if it just disappeared or if aliens came down and zapped it and it turned it into dust. It doesn't really matter. What matters is it was there and then it wasn't any longer. And that's how everything goes in life. So what that should do for you, if you can pay close attention to that fact, and we're going to give you a bunch of exercises for you to do throughout the duration of this video that you can do to bring this into a living experience instead of just a thought process in your mind. But what that should do is make it much easier for you to cut ties with situations, with people and with even your own thoughts about yourself that are not serving you anymore, that are not bringing you deep satisfaction and joy, that are dragging you down, okay? But at the same time, it should make very obvious the people, the places, the situations, and the things that you have currently in your life that you could dedicate more time, more effort, and more awareness to enjoying, okay? So by paying attention and becoming aware of death in all its many forms and all its many disguises, and become aware that it's lurking around all the time, that will make the situations that are satisfying, that are beautiful, that are enjoyable to you more obvious. And those should become more sparkling. Those should become more radiant in your life, okay? So just by becoming more aware of death and the fact that it is ubiquitous, that it is everywhere, that it's surrounding you at all times, that alone will start to change your life in remarkable ways. And again, that is the point of this workshop. So, due to the commodification, the Hollywoodization, and the basic sanitization and euphemization of death out of our lives, this workshop has become necessary. Death is all around us, like a great mystery staring us in the face. But what does it have to tell you? Have you ever listened to death? Have you ever become aware of its presence right behind the eyes of everyone you know? From now on, when you're spending time with a friend or with a family member and you're sitting there feeling bored or not saying what you really want to say or not doing what you really want to do, then I want you to become aware of death. Just look around and you'll see it. It's there, everywhere. If you look at a picture of yourself when you were a child, you'll see that you've aged between then and now. If you think of how you felt when you were 10 years old compared to how you feel when you're 20 and then when you're 30 and so on, then you'll notice that you're aging. You'll notice the other people in your life are aging, and that every situation that you used to think was permanent was nothing but another piece of ephemera. Nothing but ephemeral, moving, constantly moving, ever edging you closer to death. So this workshop is not about the afterlife, not about the supposed afterlife, but it's actually about here and now. What is actually happening for you in your life now. Now, very interesting. I read once about the rituals of some of the remaining tribes or bands of hunter-gatherers in Papua New Guinea, and one of the things that they believed, now what's interesting is if you tell them about our death rituals, about burying people and or cremating people, often their reaction was that we are very ridiculous for doing so. Now what they do is they would take the bodies of their dead and let them rot, let animals pick away at them until there was just some bones and various little bits remaining. And then they would take those remains and bring them out into the forest and place them into crevices in the woods, okay? Crevices that looked like a woman's vagina, that were in that shape. And they would take the remains of bodies and put them into trees, put them into caves, put them into holes in the ground that resembled that. And what they felt was going on by doing so was that they were impregnating the wild with the dead remains of their family members, of their friends, and that more wildness, that streams, that forests, that mountains, and that wild animals, and so on, would come forth, would burst forth from that ritual of impregnating the wild with the remains of the dead. Now, I don't know if that's true. I haven't done the ritual to verify it, as I'm sure none of you watching this have. However, that always remained a fascinating idea to me, and that's something that still, if possible, I would love to have happen with my remains. if any of you are left after my perception goes away. Now that's something you can think about. How much of all of life is determined, is reliant on your perception being there to perceive it. Okay, so that's an interesting question, and one that we won't get into very much right now, but something to think about. So really, what is the point of paying attention to death in this way? Well, it's to face it once and for all, to look at that word and to understand everything, all the fears, all the shadows, all the denial that you've put in there, to unpack it and to find out what you know for sure, and at the same time to stop taking your life for granted, to stop taking the people and the situations in your life for granted, or conversely, to get rid of the things that aren't serving you in your life, okay? And to do so effortlessly rather than to have to make a bunch of effort to find out what it is you really want. If you face death squarely on and realize it's everywhere, all around you, then automatically you're going to start taking action in your life towards what you want. And also you're going to just stop giving a fuck about all the things that are holding you back or that appear to be holding you back, okay? So we want to stop making metaphysical judgments about death. It's good, it's bad, it's evil. It's right if it's done in this way, it's wrong if it happens in that way, and all those kinds of things. But just to look at it squarely in the face and to understand what it is, to understand what you can know about it, and also to face the facts about what you cannot know about it. Is it really there? Or is it just the frustration of your expectations? Now that question I will leave up to you. And again, I would like to ask you, whose life is it anyway? Okay, so now we come to our first exercise. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to listen to the exercise and then to pause the video and do the exercise for yourself. And actually, for the sake of the video, I will go ahead and do it for 5 minutes and let you begin. And then after that 5 minutes, I'll read my list. And then you can go ahead and pause the video and do the exercise for the full 15 minutes. But just to give you an experience of it, let's do it together. And that way, you will not feel like you're adding extra time to the workshop by doing that. That's a little trick I'm putting in here for you. But you can do the exercise along with me for at least 5 minutes, and if you have more time, pause the video and do it for the full 15. Now I urge you to do these exercises now while you've dedicated the time to doing this workshop, rather than telling yourself you're going to do them later. Because of course, what is the subject of this workshop? Death. Is there a later that you're going to have to do these exercises or not? Well, you don't really know. Since you're doing this now, you may as well do the exercises now as well. So we're going to go ahead and set a timer for 5 minutes, and you may as well do this exercise. So I'll set the timer, and when we hear that go off, then I will share with you my list, and we'll go ahead and start it now. So again, what we're doing is making a list of all the things that you have in your life, and then we'll use that list for another exercise. So just make a list of everything you have, all the situations, your job, your hobbies, everything that you have in your life, the things you own, all of that. So go ahead and start now. Again, just keep on doing the exercise, and we'll leave this going for about 5 minutes. So look at all the things you have in your life. Now it's okay if you don't get all of them, but just keep on making a list and try to not stop writing. Just make a list of all the things you have. If you need to, grab your notebook or your computer, or however you're making this list, and just go around your house and look around at things. Be sure to include your house, include your ideas, include your clothes, all the little different things that you have. And also include non-tangible things that you think you have, like plans, ideas, goals. Aspirations, hopes. And just continue writing. If you're running out of things, you can include various sensory perceptions, parts of your body, memories, feelings, emotions. And we'll go through the list. Take about another 50 seconds. Okay, so that's been 5 minutes. Like I said, if you feel like you have more to add to your list, go ahead and pause the video and continue writing until you're finished with that. Now what I want you to do is, as I read this list, I'm going to go slowly through it, and for every item on your own list, while I read through these, I want you to remember that everything on the list will be gone from your life. Maybe later today, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe 2 years from now, who knows, maybe a decade from now. But at some point, you're going to lose everything on this list. And if you're really honest with yourself, you don't really have most of the things on your list. All you really have is proximity to them. So for example, I have some papers and notebooks. I have some coffee here right now. The computer on which this is being filmed. But what I mostly have is ideas about things, and then various proximities to those things. Okay, so if I have friends, those are ideas of friends, and some of those friends are closer in proximity to me or further away. Okay, so a lot of the things we have, and hopefully you'll get a sense of the fascination with this fact, but a lot of the things that you think you have are just ideas of having, and then proximity. So think about that and see how it feels. I'm going to go through my list. I have books, some in boxes, some out. I have a bag full of incense. I have a partner. I have a computer, some websites, a business, a home that's rented, ideas, thoughts, beliefs, friends, this cup of coffee. Believe I have the food I ate earlier in my body in various different states of being digested. Also have money, a vehicle, electricity, a bracelet, a necklace, oils, soaps, clothes, a car rack, climbing gear, a phone, headphones, trinkets, various accounts online, art supplies, notebooks, plans, goals, aspirations, hopes, fears, a body, hands, feet, this moment, perception, awareness, intentions, sounds, sensory perception and data, body parts, memories, feelings, emotions, tastes, preferences, avoidances, resistances, pencils, pens, luggage, bags, a name, some hair, work, the future, air, water, nourishment, light, and electricity. Now, as I read that list, I notice I don't really have much of anything besides ideas about things. Okay? So most ownership is simply an idea and a proximity. But the interesting thing is everything on that list, from the trivial to the most loved, the most beloved of the things on my list, from the most trivial to the most beloved, all of them have one thing in common. And what is that? That it's ephemeral, that it's going away, that in essence it's on its way out of your life. That doesn't mean new people, new things, and new experiences won't come into your life. Of course, they always do. But even those things are on their way in, and then as soon as they're in, they're on their way back out. So just sit with that feeling for a little while. Might make you a little sad at first, but it'll also bring you, hopefully, a new way of looking at things in your life. Okay? Now we're going to do the same exercise again, but this time instead of things that you have, you're going to do it with people that you know. So I will simply do this exercise just for 1 minute. Okay, but I want you, if you can, to do it for at least 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or as long as it takes to make a complete list of everyone you know or have known in your life. So I'll just set a timer and do that for 1 minute. So at least if you're watching this video and that's all the time you have, at least do the exercise for that 1 minute that I'm doing it here. Okay, don't just sit there and wait for me to be done. Do it along with me. I've included these times in the workshop specifically to get you to do the exercises rather than to do the exercises now rather than to tell yourself that you'll do them later, because of course we don't know if there will be a later, and even if there is, you probably won't remember to do your death awareness exercises. So do them now. If you'd like, you could even create a special journal and then do these exercises over and over until you get a firm grasp and focus on death that's strong enough to maintain itself every day and throughout every moment in your life, which will, hopefully, if you do it correctly, bring you into a deeper awareness and appreciation of every single experience that you have in your life. Okay, something I've often told clients is, and when I say clients, I mean people that I'm working closely with on the undoing work, something I've often told clients is when they're having a really difficult emotional time, I tell them, enjoy that experience because you never know when it's going to come around again. Enjoy the intensity of that experience because you never know when or if you'll be able to feel that way again. Now, of course, that may not sound like much, it may sound mean, but a lot of people have thanked me for bringing that to their attention while they were in the midst of what they perceived as their most difficult moments. Suddenly, the texture of the experience became a lot more radiant, and their judgment of it as negative or bad or wrong fell away as they became aware of the richness of the experience itself. And hopefully, some of that's starting to dawn on you as well. So again, let's make a list of everyone you know. If you need to go for longer than a minute, just go ahead and pause the video and go for as long as it takes. But I'll just make a short list and we'll go from there. Okay, now on that very, very short list already, the first three people that came to mind were three people I knew who are now dead. The first one was my friend Bob. He died in a solo drunk driving accident. That story is worth telling just for all of you who are in relationships and have gotten into the habit of shitting on each other over usually ridiculous stuff. He was at his girlfriend's house. They had both been drinking. This was in central Minnesota in the wintertime. And he got angry and she asked him to leave. He walked out completely drunk, got in his car to drive away, and basically just swerved off the road, hit a telephone pole, and smashed his face and throat on the steering wheel. As far as I know, he was not wearing a seatbelt, as people who are driving completely wasted sometimes forget to do. And just a couple minutes later, his girlfriend had followed after him, wanting to get him to come back over to apologize, to make up with him. And she found him there, still alive, and held him in her arms as he finally died. I don't know what the content of that conversation was. I'm not sure it really matters that much. But that's someone I knew, someone who I was close to in my life. It wasn't that surprising that that happened. To him in particular, he had gotten into a pretty bad habit of drinking and driving really often. But when I heard the news, it hit me pretty hard. I was young at the time. I was about 19, and I had hung out with him, just a couple weeks or so earlier, and suddenly he was just gone. Now, for his girlfriend, that was a moment that I would expect has taken her a long time, and maybe she'll never quite get over it. But something where if we were more aware constantly of the ephemeral nature of the people in our lives and of the situations in our lives, that kind of suffering could have been avoided. Simply by becoming more aware of, again, the ephemeral nature of our lives. Now, it could have been avoided in one of two ways. One is she and he could have realized that their fights were not worth having, or one or both of them could have realized that it was unnecessary to keep spending that type of time with each other if they weren't really enjoying it and if they weren't really appreciating each other in that way. Then they could have helped each other into new situations where they would be able to appreciate them. But there is a deeper level of appreciation that you can have, and that I urge you to explore for yourself, which is to be able to appreciate every moment simply by virtue of it being a moment in your life. We don't always get to choose. In fact, most often we don't get to choose at all what type of circumstances we end up in, but we do get to choose how we handle those circumstances and what we do in them. So in those moments, what I would urge you to do is to at least figure out somehow how to appreciate what it is you have going on in your life, regardless of what it is, regardless of how positive or negative you happen to be judging it at the current moment. And extending that appreciation from a natural awareness of the ephemeral nature of it. Okay, so even the most terrible experiences in your life may be very rare, and they may be very rich and very intense. And by resisting them, and by clinging to your own expectations of how things are supposed to go rather than how they actually are going, you're going to miss a lot of the intensity and a lot of the richness of the various experiences in your life. Okay, so if you can let go of the judgment of good or bad, right or wrong, and just pay attention to what is, then from that you will feel a deeper sense of appreciation. And you'll also just be a lot more aware of what's actually going on, rather than crying and complaining about how reality's not living up to your expectations of it in whatever way. That doesn't mean you don't keep working toward what you want and doing things that feel exciting, or that you feel passionate about, or that you find deeply satisfying. Okay, but what that does mean is when your expectations are inevitably thwarted, that you pay attention to what is rather than paying close attention to your own complaints and to your own dissatisfactions and your own ideas about how things should have been. Okay, because how things are is how things are, and that will always be faithful to you. You can always rely on what is to be what is. That may sound funny, but if you really pay attention to that and think it through, there can be some solace there, and there can be a wellspring of appreciation for all the circumstances of your life, rather than just the few that happen to go the way you expected them to go. All right? So hopefully that makes sense, and you're starting to get a deeper sense of what we mean by facing death to come back to life. Okay? Now I want to give you another exercise, and make note, all of these exercises will be there in the PDF for you to do and for you to repeat later. And I encourage you to repeat these, at least one or two of these exercises once a week. And if you can, try to bring into your awareness the ephemeral nature of everything you're experiencing, at least once a day, if not throughout the entire day. I know in Jed McKenna's book, Spiritual Warfare, which is the third book in the series, there's a great section on death awareness. In fact, a lot of that book is about using death awareness to become more aware in your life. So I highly recommend that book and that series. But in particular, he mentions a Henry David Thoreau quote, which is, "Only that day dawns to which we are awake." And he recommends writing that in your bathroom mirror so you have to see it every morning and every night. Only that day dawns to which we are awake. So write that down and remember it and contemplate that. What does that mean to you? Only that day dawns to which we are awake. Another thing that I remember from his meditations on death are, what does it mean to have another day? So when you wake up, you can start the day with a sense of appreciation, with a sense of awe, with a sense of gratitude, and with a sense of curious expectancy for whatever is about to come next into your life. And by paying closer attention to the ephemeral nature of it, you will also find your life filled with a lot more present awareness of what's actually going on, and a lot less rumination on your memories and rumination on your ideas. Again, your ideas of how things are supposed to be, okay? Which can put to rest that battle inside your mind about not living up to your ideals, not living up to the ideas that other people want you to live up to. Okay, all that stuff goes away when you can pay closer attention to the ephemeral nature of everything you're experiencing. That's going to bring your awareness, skyrocket your awareness to its fullest potential. Okay? And again, that's the goal here. So the next exercise I'm going to recommend that you do is to pause the video and take at least 10 minutes to write your own obituary. Okay? Take at least 10 minutes to write your own obituary. If you need to, take a look at some obituaries you find in the newspaper or online. Read how they're written, and look for nice longer ones. You're going to want to make deeper observations in this obituary. So just write your own obituary as if you had just dropped dead right now while you were watching this video, for example, or just today in your life. Write an obituary for yourself as though you had just dropped dead. Now I'm going to set a timer for 2 minutes just to not take up too much time on the video, but also to encourage you to not just skip this exercise until later. So at least take these 2 minutes to do the exercise along with me. And if you have more time, I encourage you to pause the video and do it until you write an obituary that you feel comfortable with for yourself. So we'll go ahead and start right now, and I'll write an obituary and share with you what I've written fresh. Okay, so as you hopefully noticed, 2 minutes really isn't enough time to do this exercise to its full potential. And hopefully, if you haven't done so, you'll pause the video and do it now and really explore it. Go deep with this. Just let yourself write without editing. And later, if you want to do it even more, you can edit it, make it more beautiful, and read it. Read it every day and make changes to it every day. Now, you don't need to spend that much time on it. Of course, I want you guys to be focusing on living your life, but at the same time being fully aware of the death that is surrounding us and of the ephemeral nature of time ticking away and running out, just as it is on this video. We're going to go for about another 15 to 30 minutes or so here. But as you can tell, and this was done very deliberately, The light has started to get less and less as the sun fades away for the evening. I can hear people returning home from their days at work, and you're starting to see, the approximation of sunset right on the video here. Okay, so that's another sign of the ephemeral nature of everything in our lives. Even this video will come to an end. You will finish the death workshop, which you just started only a short hour ago, and everything, even the words I'm saying, are just passing away, passing away, passing away as we speak. Okay, so try to become aware of that in your lives. I'll read you my very short obituary. Garrett Dawn, age 36, died today in his home in southeast Portland, Oregon. He's survived by his beautiful partner, his sister, his 2 brothers, and all of their many grandchildren. He's remembered more by his many clients than he is even by his family, due to the depth of the experiences he cultivated and shared with them. He felt most at home while playing games, preparing meals, exploring abandoned places, and simply sharing laughs and good times with his partner, and more occasionally with his friends and with his clients. That's all I wrote. There's a lot more that came to mind that I would have liked to write. But just from doing that, I felt a deep sense of appreciation for all the experiences I've had in my life, for all of you guys watching this video and who've watched the other videos. I take the most pleasure from just constantly immersing myself in these types of experiences and helping to share what I've observed, what I've learned with all of you, and hopefully helping you to create the same types of experiences that I've enjoyed, and to instill a deep sense of appreciation in your life as well. And of course I enjoy that because then you guys feed that back to me, and then I remember to cultivate that yet again in my own life. Okay, so the next part of that exercise, after you've done that one to its completion, is then to write your own obituary as though you've died 5 years from today. So 5 years into the future. Write your own obituary as if it happened 5 years into the future from now. Okay, and spend at least, again, 10, 15 minutes on that exercise. You want to get deep with it. A lot of the stuff you write when you first try it will not go as deep as you'll go if you really spend some more time on it. And then even take the time to let it sit for a day, come back and edit it, really make it a nice piece of work. But I'm going to go ahead and again set a timer just for 2 minutes and do the exercise so you can get sort of a juxtaposition of the one I wrote as though I died just now, and then the one I wrote if I died when I'm 41 years old, 5 years into the future. So you guys, again, take these 2 minutes and at least just get a start on the exercise. That way you've got it started. You can do it on a document on your computer and then continue after the video is over, or even now, as soon as the 2 minutes are up, if you're excited and you got flowing with it, just pause the video and carry on from there. Okay, so go ahead and take 2 minutes, and we'll start with that right now. So just take this 2 minutes as a gift with which you can start that exercise. Again, it's your obituary as though you died 5 years from now. And finish up the last sentence you're writing. All right. As they say, Gesundheit, or sometimes bless me. And thank you to those of you who automatically said that as well after you heard me sneeze. Even though it is a video, I appreciate it. So here's my obituary from 5 years from now. Now you have a big smile on my face. I really enjoy doing these exercises. They can be so revealing about what's going on in your mind while you do them. So Garrett Dawn died at age 41 in a remote location in the Spanish mountains. He was exploring some recently discovered ruins with his partner of 6 years. While she was saddened and shocked by his sudden death, she commented that he died while enjoying life to the fullest, and that his last words to her were, "No matter what happens, always enjoy your life." So that's just what came off the top of my head, and just in those 2 minutes. We can't write as much as I would like to, but I also don't want to keep you sitting here on the video watching me write for 15 minutes. But again, I use that as a very specific tactic to get you to actually do the exercises right now while you're in the midst of thinking about them, rather than putting them off to another day or to later, which may never come. Okay, so take the time, and if you didn't do it just now, I don't know what you were doing for the last 2 minutes, or maybe you skipped ahead in the video, but if you did that, I urge you to pause the video and do the exercise now. There's no reason not to. Now, if for some reason you're watching the video and you don't have the time to do the exercise right now, then I urge you to schedule in a time on your calendar or on a Google Calendar, however you schedule your time. Schedule in a time for yourself to do the exercises. Okay, so 1, write your own obituary as if you just died now, right before you're writing it. And then the second one is to write your own obituary as if you died 5 years from now. Okay, and I'll let you discover the joyous results of that exercise. But I want you to observe, after you've done both exercises, observe the difference between the obituary for yourself as if you died right now versus the obituary that you wrote for yourself for 5 years into the future. Now, we do repeat these exercises in some of the Command Z courses. They're very powerful and in my opinion, very fun exercises that are really revealing about a lot of things about your life. So again, it's another way of looking at death in order to gain insight into life. Excuse me. And so, like I said, we have those in Radical Undoing 101, which I'll link to here with the video. And then we also have those exercises in the Radical Undoing, the Command Z Radical Undoing 4-week intensives, which are another experience that will bring you face to face with a lot of various experiences that will bring your appreciation and your awareness back into what is, back into the circumstances you find yourself in, and then give you a lot of tools, a lot more tools to go into a lot more depth with these types of experiments and these types of experiences. Now, another exercise that I was going to add, but that we won't do right now, but again, that I urge you, if you're watching this and you're in this mode of paying attention to death, is to write the story of your own funeral. Write it how you want it to go. Maybe do it two times. Write the story of how you would want it to go. Okay, now that serves a couple different purposes. You can leave that for the people in your life to use to create the funeral you want. Okay, I always wonder about the futility of such exercises since I'm not going to be there to enjoy it. But if you want to gamble on the fact that people will still exist after you die and that they'll be taking care of your body and having a funeral, well then write the story of how you'd like that to go. But you could also write the story of how you think it is likely to go. So take that whatever direction you want. But it's another way to pay attention to death, writing the story of your own funeral, and to explore your own thoughts about it in maybe a new way that you wouldn't become aware of otherwise, okay? So make sure you do all the exercises that I've mentioned, some of them that we've done so far, and then other ones that you're going to find in the PDF that I'll also mention here. But don't just think about the exercises, because just thinking about them is a lot different than doing them, okay? I don't know how many times I've mentioned that in the past, but hopefully that sinks in and you're remembering that. Doing an exercise is a lot different than just thinking about it. Another exercise is the gravestone quote. What does your gravestone say? Okay, so maybe you've seen some cool sayings on gravestones. Most of what I've seen is really not very inspiring and usually related to some religion or another, or about how the dead person is now with Jesus, which that means absolutely nothing to me. Maybe it means something to you, I don't know, but try to come up with a good quote, something inspiring that you'd want to see if you were looking at your own gravestone. Spend some time on that. Spend 5 or 10 minutes, or just make a huge ongoing list of potential quotes for your gravestone. Another exercise is to look up and read obituaries of people who are your age, people who died when they were your exact age. So for me, that'd be people who are 36. If you're 25, okay, then look up people who died now who are 25. You can do that in multiple places online, and I will put a couple different resources for you for how to do that. Okay, so again, that's something you can do every day, just to bring into your awareness the fact that people die while they're your age. So read obituaries of people who died while they were your age. Another exercise you can do is to write out, what is it like to be dead? Try and explore that in your mind, and you'll find that you know a lot less about death than you currently think. What is it like to be dead? What does that even mean? So spend some time writing about that and explore that. Again, with these writing exercises, you want to spend at least 15 minutes, because often the first 2 or 3 minutes are just getting the mental vomit out of the way and then catching hold of something that feels worthy to write about, something that feels like it has some intensity, some emotion, some power in it. You want to be as honest as you possibly can. Don't just write flowery language and lie to yourself about what's going on, but try to really get a sense of the question and explore it in detail. Now, another question, another exercise that you'll also find in the PDF is, how do you know if you're living or not? How do you know if you're alive? What does that mean? Okay, that may sound ridiculous, and it's easy to blow off the question and just act like you already know the answer. Okay, but if you do know the answer, then go ahead and write it out. Spend 5 or 10 minutes, or like I said, 15 minutes or longer, writing about how do you know if you're alive. Okay, how do you know if you're alive? And be honest with yourself. Really get clear on that point. Now, finally, as we come closer to the end of the workshop, I wanted to bring up something that came up at the beginning, which is, do you know, and I want you to be honest with yourself about this. Doesn't matter if you talk with other people about it, and it doesn't matter if you share this with anyone, but I want you to be honest with yourself about it, and that is, do you know for sure, with 100% certainty, that you will die? Do you know that? Is it possible to know that fact? Because I've brought that up to hundreds of people in my life. Do you know? What do you know for sure? What do you know with 100% certainty? And a lot of people answer, I know that everyone dies. Okay? Now, it's easy to go, oh yeah, okay, that's an obvious one. Yep, I'm going to die. And to just go ahead and go on believing that. But do you know that with 100% certainty? Okay, and I'll leave the answer to that question up to you, but that's an important question for you to think about. Do you know with 100% certainty that you are going to die? Look at it very closely and don't lie to yourself about that. You might find some very interesting revelations from exploring that question. Another interesting thing that Paula brought to my attention is about demystifying death. Okay, so we all think we know what it is. Usually we're referring to when a person goes from being animated and living and engaging with us in our lives to just not being there anymore at all. So from a living body to a lifeless body, and then an absence of that person forever after. So what Paula brought up that was really fascinating to me is that we don't know what death is. We don't know what it is at all. But understanding some of our thoughts about it, understanding some of the circumstances that we experience around it in a clear way, and removing all the mystical ideas and all the magical thoughts and all the fantasies about what's going to happen when you die in some cloudy paradise or fiery and brimstone hell, we can have a clearer and wider perspective about what our lives are really about. Okay? So you want to clear out the mystical thinking, clear out all the magical assumptions, clear out all the religious baggage that we've been taught to hide within, to shield ourselves from death, and just look at it. What is it? What is death? Is it coming for you? I don't know. All I can say with 100% certainty is that it seems that some people who used to be in my life aren't anymore, and some of them aren't in life anymore as far as I know. In my memories, I have the idea that I had a mother, and then I have the ideas and the memory that I saw her dead in a casket, and then that she was cremated, and then that I had a container of her ashes, and then that I did a ritual with those ashes and scattered them into the breeze and into the river. But all I have is the memories of that. Okay? So again, where is death? What is death? Ask yourself these questions every day. But know that for all intents and purposes, it appears that everything that we have, everything that we know, everything that we are, and everyone that we know is on its way out. Sooner or later, it's all on its way out. Okay, and by becoming aware of that, you can start to appreciate all the circumstances of your life a lot more. And ultimately, everything that I put out with Command Z and with the Art of Not Giving a Fuck is meant for you to experience a deep and profound appreciation for yourself and for your life exactly as you find it right now. No matter what your existential circumstances happen to be, no matter what problems you've convinced yourself that you have, the idea here is to develop an appreciation for the basic facts of existence, just for perception itself. Now again, a song I've often brought up by Bonnie Prince Billy has the lyrics, "It's a hard life for a man with no wife. Oh, it's a hard life God makes you live. But without it, baby, don't doubt it, you don't even have the tears to give." Okay? So without life, without perception itself, you wouldn't even have the tears to cry for all the seemingly difficult circumstances you find yourself in. I hope you're getting the depth of what is expressed there in that sentiment. If you're not, then think about it again. It's a hard life. It's a hard life for someone who has no relationship, no deep connection. It's a hard life that we seem to be forced to live by these external circumstances that we're a victim to. Okay, but without it, without your perception, without your life itself, you wouldn't even have the tears to give. You wouldn't even have the complaints to make about it. You wouldn't have the voice to complain with. Okay, so think about that. Let that develop a new awareness and a new appreciation for everything that you're going through, everything that you will go through, and for everything that you are or are not right now. Now, another question was brought to my attention by Paula. How is radical undoing connected to life? Connected to death. How is radical undoing in the exercises, the bodywork exercises we do through Command Z and through the Art of Not Giving a Fuck? How are those connected to death? Well, when we remove our beliefs and the fears that we have about things, in this case about death, then we can start experiencing life and death by what they actually are, okay, by what the content of those words is referring to. We can start to get clear and remove the fear that generally pushes us to covering up the awareness of death, to sanitizing it, to getting rid of an awareness of it in our lives. We can bring that back in, open ourselves up to it, explore it for what it is, and then again, develop a natural and free-flowing appreciation for all that is. If you're not there yet, don't worry. Just do the exercises and see where you get. Your results are your results, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so that comes to the end of the exercises that I have for you. But I wanted to conclude with a few quotes that I gathered that kind of continue with the essence of what we're trying to do with the death workshop here. But remember, the exercises that I gave you are the essence of this. Okay, you can get a sense of what I'm talking about, of that natural, free-flowing appreciation, that inner appreciation for yourself as you are, and for circumstances however they appear to be. But to really develop that and to maintain it and to hold on to it and to keep experiencing it in your life, you'll need to keep bringing your awareness into places that are usually shadowed. Okay? Keep bringing light to the shadows. Keep bringing your awareness onto your fears and onto death itself. Okay? Now again, you can do that by visiting cemeteries. You can do that by contemplating suicide. Now, of course, I'll mention the standard disclaimer. All of this is for entertainment purposes only, so anything I'm saying is not to be taken as a literal suggestion, but just as an idea that some guy on a video brought up. Okay, so what you do with your life is your own responsibility. But at least bringing into your mind what it means to have control of your life. Most states have laws against suicide, of course, which are laws against attempted suicide, because if you're successful, then you're not around to be prosecuted. But there are a couple states where physician-assisted suicide is legal. That is one of the most fundamental rights you could ever have. And I would ask you to question ruthlessly any forces who are attempting to take that away from you. But I want you to think about that for yourself. So suicide contemplation can actually make you very aware of all the beautiful reasons why you don't want to do it, but it can also help you to put yourself in the driver's seat of your life, to put yourself back in charge of your own life. Okay? And I have contemplated taking my own life many times throughout my 36 years, sometimes more seriously than others, but ultimately every time that has come to mind has then led to an opening up of my awareness into the actual beauty and opportunity of the circumstances I find myself in. By contemplating your own death, by contemplating your own suicide, the taking of your own life, you can start to realize and become aware of all the different possibilities that exist for you outside of that possibility. Okay, so strangely enough, by contemplating that, you can also become aware of all the other possibilities you have in your life. And now, without further banter on my part, we're going to get into some quotes. The first is by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Now, she's perhaps the most well-known author of a series of different books on death, one of which is called On Death and Dying. All of her books come highly recommended. They'll give you some more ways to think about death and to perceive, to open up your awareness into that often shadowy but ever-present force. And her quote says, "Those who have the strength and the love to sit with a dying patient in the silence that goes beyond words will know that this moment is neither frightening nor painful, but a peaceful cessation of the functioning of the body." Again, that's Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Now I'm going to read a poem by Robinson Jeffers. Something fascinating about this is about a month before my mother died. And she died rather suddenly. She was fine at about 10 in the morning, and then by about 10 p.m. On that same day, she died in the hospital in Minnesota. About a month before that, I had been reading her poems by one of my favorite poets, Robinson Jeffers. If you've never heard of him, look him up. He's well worth the read, well worth the effort it takes to try to understand him. I read her a brief poem that he had written for his wife after she died, called Cremation. I had this put on the little funeral document we handed out to everyone at her funeral. But what was fascinating about it was that I had read it to her over the phone, and after she heard it, she told me that is what she wanted to have happen to her own body after she died. So there was no mystery about what she wanted. We were able to do that. And I felt pretty satisfied with that. But it was fascinating to me that I had read her this poem only a month before. Interestingly enough, at the time of this filming, just yesterday, yesterday on February 18th, was the 12-year anniversary of her death. So, and that was one of the more profound death experiences I had in my life, was when she died. So it's fitting that I'm doing this workshop today, and hopefully you get a sense of the depth and appreciation I have for death and for life and for the presence of all you guys watching this. I have a deep appreciation for you, and I hope some of that has come across in this video. So without further ado, the poem on Cremation by Robinson Jeffers. "It nearly cancels my fear of death," my dearest said, "when I think of cremation. To rot in the earth is a loathsome end, but to roar up in flames. Besides, I'm used to it. I've flamed with love or fury so often in my life. No wonder my body is tired. No wonder it is dying. We had great joy of my body. Scatter the ashes." The next is a quote by Schopenhauer. "They tell us that suicide is the greatest piece of cowardice. That suicide is wrong, when it is quite obvious that there is nothing in the world to which every man has a more unassailable title than to his own life and person." Now a quote by Horace. "Pale death beats equally at the poor man's gate and at the palaces of kings." Another by Bryant H. McGill. "Birth and death. We all move between these two unknowns." Now one by Mark Twain. "The fear of death follows from the fear of life. A man who lives fully is prepared to die at any time." And that's getting to the essence of what this workshop is all about. Now another, "It is a curious thing, the death of a loved one. We all know that our time in this world is limited, and that eventually all of us will end up underneath some sheet never to wake up. And yet it is always a surprise when it happens to someone we know. It's like walking up the stairs to your bedroom in the dark and thinking there's one more stair than there is. Your foot falls down through the air, and there is a sickly moment of dark surprise as you try and readjust the way you thought of things." And that's by Lemony Snicket from the book Horseradish, Bitter Truths You Can't Avoid. "It is said that your life flashes before your eyes just before you die. That is true. It's called life." That's by Terry Pratchett. "The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death." And that's J.K. Rowling. "I could die for you, but I couldn't and wouldn't live for you." Ayn Rand from The Fountainhead. "A man dies. Only a few circles in the water prove that he was ever there. and even they quickly disappear. And when they're gone, he's forgotten, without a trace, as if he'd never even existed. And that's all. Wolfgang Borchert, The Outsider. We sometimes congratulate ourselves at the moment of waking from a troubled dream. It may be so the moment after death. Nathaniel Hawthorne. How surely are the dead beyond death? Death is what the living carry with them, a state of dread, like some uncanny foretaste of a bitter memory. But the dead do not remember, and nothingness is not a curse. Far from it. Cormac McCarthy. No one wants to die. Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there. And yet death is the destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it, and that is as it should be, because death is very likely the single best invention of life. It is life's change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new. Right now, the new is you, but someday, not too long from now, you will gradually become the old and be cleared away. Sorry to be so dramatic, but it is quite true. Steve Jobs, in his commencement address at Stanford University, June 12th, 2005. And finally, death can come at any moment, to anyone and everyone you know. But can it, has it, or does it come for you? No one alive knows the answer. And that last one is something that I said. So I'll leave you with that. I wish you all the best and most beautiful and most aware night of your lives. Have a wonderful evening. And if you wake up tomorrow, I hope you wake up with this awareness and that you have the most beautiful day of your life. And that every day from now until when the days come to an end, that you continue to have again and again the best day of your life. Enjoy.